All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. How's things, Martyn?
Well, Jake, you can probably good to see you, mate. You can probably tell how things are by looking at the two of us because you're wearing a nice T-shirt in lovely hot weather on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and I'm wearing a very heavy pullover in Brighouse in England. This morning, I got up and found it was something like -3 degrees, and went out to the car and had to scrape all the ice off and so on, which is not much fun, to be perfectly honest. So I eventually managed to clear it and drove here. But I think I'd rather be where you are. So if you've got a spare room in your place, mate, I think I might hop on the next plane because
Oh, mate.
we're coming towards the end of November, and it's going to get even colder over here probably.
Oh, oh, mate. Well, I'm in the spare room at the moment, mate, so always welcome.
Right.
But I was
I'm
just
not keen on
pulling
sharing
out.
that with you.
No, that's all right, mate. I've got my own. But I
Yeah.
was just looking at my weather app here. We've got 27 degrees on the Sunshine Coast, and
Oh,
there's a
don't lay it
warning.
on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there's an extreme heat warning that's going to last until 8:17 p.m. tonight. So,
Right. Okay.
I think I'll be having a cold shower tonight, mate, to cool down before bed. Um, but nonetheless, mate, the rugby league news cycle doesn't stop for the weather, so we've
It
got
doesn't.
a
No,
bit to
no.
talk about today.
Loads.
The first, yeah, off the top, mate. World Cup fixtures being announced. What are your thoughts? And can the World Cup deliver with I guess less teams this year?
Well, it has to, hasn't it? And thank goodness the fixtures are out at last. I mean, they should have been out some time ago, with less than a year's notice. It's been very frustrating for a lot of English fans because a lot of English fans were keen to come out to Australia for the World Cup, as you can imagine. But they've not been able to make any plans because they've not known what the fixtures are. We do now know that England will be playing in the first two fixtures in Perth, which is a beautiful city. Having been there myself before, so at least they can start planning. Um, but I mean, the World Cup is going to start with a blockbusting game, isn't it? Australia v New Zealand at Alliance Stadium in Sydney. And most people probably would suggest that those two teams are likely to meet in the final. I mean, they're the clear favourites, and it will allow one of them to put down a marker on the 15th of October next year. But the problem is that there are only 10 teams, and the way it's been organised, a top group of a group of four that includes Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, and Papua New Guinea, with two of those going through to the semi-final. Well, I think you could get pretty short odds on Australia and New Zealand going through, Jake. And I think you've got to say that Fiji and Papua New Guinea look to me as though they're there to make up the numbers, unfortunately. I'm not quite sure what justification there is for putting those two teams in the in what looks to be the top group. And then it's a very complicated system for the rest of the six teams. The six teams are split into two notional groups of three, but instead of playing teams within the groups, they play teams in the other group. And it looks to me as though the planners of the World Cup have organised it with a view to the four teams in the semi-final being Australia, New Zealand, England, and Samoa. And the worrying thing for me is that there are going to be a relatively small number of tightly contested games. Quite a few of the games look to me to be a bit, potentially a bit one-sided, and that's unfortunate for a tournament like this. And it'll be interesting to see what the crowd appeal is. I'm pretty sure that the opening game will sell out very, very easily. But I'm surprised that I mean that they've got Samoa playing Tonga. I think is it week three that those two teams play each other,
Yeah,
which will
week
be
three.
a crucial game, and that's part of a double header at Combank Stadium at Parramatta. Um, I think it's a double header with a France game, isn't it? France and Lebanon.
Lebanon, yeah.
Yeah, that strikes me as being very odd because, you know, Samoa and Tonga don't need to be bracketed with any other game to sell out that stadium, I wouldn't have thought. But, you know, if I'd been looking to make a big impact in week one, I would have put Samoa and Tonga on in Brisbane you know, on the Saturday after Australia, New Zealand, you know, start the tournament on the Thursday night. So you get two real bumper games and bumper crowds and so on, and really get the competition off to a great start. So it strikes me as being slightly odd in that sense. I'm surprised at the way it's been planned. Um, I mean, England play Tonga in the opening game in Perth. Well, we've seen before that Tonga are great when they play in front of lots of their own supporters, but I'm not sure how many people of Tongan heritage live in Perth. I don't think it's a massive number, if I'm really honest about it. So it would have been sensible if England are going to play Tonga. It would be you could actually. It would have been great to play that game in Auckland, if we're honest about it, where so many Tongans live, and there was such a terrific atmosphere in that 2017 World Cup semi-final. You know, that
Hmm.
would have been the obvious place for that game, but it would have obviously made it a lot harder for England to win it, I suppose.
Do you think they're trying to appeal to the English fans to make the trip over with that first stop in Perth?
Well, we play Tonga, and then the following week we play France. So yeah, I suppose so. You know, and France play their first game against Samoa at Combank Stadium on Friday, the 16th of October. That's the second game in the World Cup. So the poor old French have to fly all the way to Sydney, and then they've got to fly back across Australia to Perth. I mean, the obvious thing to have done would have been to play England v France as the opening game in Perth, so that both European teams could, you know, stop off in that city and play that game there before heading over to the East Coast. So again, we've not really, as far as I'm aware, had an explanation of why the competition's been created in the way that it has, why the structure has, you know, gone the way that it has. But so I think, you know, that I've got some. I mean, I've already said there's actually one game in New Zealand which will be New Zealand versus the Cook Islands, which is going to be played in Christchurch at the new stadium in Christchurch. That's just being completed, which is great. I mean, you know, it's great to see, you know, the World Cup going to Christchurch, particularly in that new stadium, and hopefully that's the precursor of a new NRL team that will be based in Christchurch in the South Island. So that's a great thing. Although I'm not sure why they've picked the Cook Islands to play there. But you know, if there are no games in Auckland, which is the real centre of rugby league in New Zealand, and there are no games scheduled for Melbourne either, which is somewhat surprising to me. Maybe the Victorian government didn't offer them any money to play any games there. Who knows? That might be the reason for that. But nonetheless, I would have thought they would have wanted to play at least one Australian game in Melbourne. You know, that would have been logical from my point of view, at least. So it's an odd one in a way, but you know, it's there now, and the NRL and the Australian Rugby League Commission have got to do their damnedest to sell out these games and make the tournament a great success. And I obviously hope they do, because we all want to see a terrific tournament that thrills the fans and attracts lots of people from England at the very least to over to Australia to watch some of these games.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And is that so? We've only got one match being played in New Zealand. Is that right?
Yes, just
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 looking at the
New
draw
Zealand
now. Yeah,
versus Cook Islands, which
that's why
seems very odd.
missed
And
opportunity because you think someone like Tonga or Samoa would draw a much bigger crowd, right?
well, of course they would. Yeah, you know, it does seem very strange to me. But and again, England's third game is against Papua New Guinea. Now, you might have thought, obviously, they'll play that game in Port Moresby at Santos Stadium, which is where Papua New Guinea will play their first two games against Lebanon and Samoa. But no, England are going to play Papua New Guinea in Wollongong, on the New South Wales south coast, or south of Sydney anyway. And that seems an odd decision, because you can guarantee that if England played PNG in Port Moresby, the atmosphere would be absolutely terrific, particularly if PNG had beaten Lebanon and Samoa in the first two games, which they may conceivably do. Who knows? But it seems odd, with the greatest of respect to Wollongong. It's not a hive of activity for Papua New Guinea people. I wouldn't have thought there won't be that many. There won't be that many there, and it's not particularly associated with England either. So it seems an odd location, really, for me to place that game. There's nothing wrong with Wollongong as a location, but it just seems an odd one for this particular game.
Yeah, and my fear with this is we're going to have games being played in locations that are obviously going to attract smaller crowds, and that's the last thing we need for a World Cup is vision of matches being played in front of no one.
Oh gosh, yes, yeah. Well, the interesting test is England versus France in Perth, because obviously two European teams playing in Perth. There's a reasonable expatriate population, I think, of English people in Perth, but will they want to come and watch a rugby league game in the Rugby League World Cup? Because I suppose most of them are probably not rugby league fans by and large. There will be a travelling England support there. I'm not sure how big it will be, though, because, as I say, it's a lot of English people probably have made other plans by now. So that's going to be an interesting test to see how good they are at selling these games. And I hope, I would love nothing more to see every game being played in front of a sellout crowd. And I hope that that's what prevails, because for the good of the World Cup and for the good of rugby league internationally, I think we desperately want this tournament to be a great success.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the other teams here. I'm trying to pick out who has the toughest fixtures. France don't have it easy, having to verse Samoa, England, Lebanon. We don't know what they're going to bring to the table yet. I mean, they could have a
No.
very good side if a few players don't make the Australian selection.
Yeah. Well, the toughest
I'm,
fixtures are those of Cook Islands, aren't they? Cook Islands are the
yeah,
ones who have drawn the hardest. I mean, Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. That's a tough one for the Cook Islands, who are ranked ninth in the International Rugby League gradings. So they will struggle a bit, I think. And but obviously we'll see how they perform. But I struggle to imagine that they'll be able to give a very tight game to Australia and New Zealand, unfortunately.
and what do you make of England's pool, mate? Do you think they'll have what it takes to get over Tonga? Who have they got?
Well, we played Tonga in the
England.
first
Oh,
game. I think playing them in Perth
yeah.
means that we've got a very good chance of beating them. Well, obviously, I think we'll beat France, and then
Mm.
that third game against Papua New Guinea, we should beat Papua New Guinea in Wollongong. But as I said earlier, it looks to me as though the organisers are wanting England to get to the semi-final, because if they hadn't, they would have played us against Tonga in Auckland, and they would have played us against Papua New Guinea in Port Moresby. And if and those two those two fixtures would be twice as hard for England in those two locations than they will be in Perth and Wollongong. So it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that doesn't mean to say England are going to win either of them or both of them, but we've certainly got a much better chance than we would have in those hotbeds of Tongan and Papua New Guinea support if they were being played there.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely, mate. In some other international rugby league news, there were some claims made by Troy Grant, the IRL chief. He's saying that apparently England Rugby League or the RFL owes £400,000 in debt, or they're in debt by £400,000 to the IRL. It looks like the RFL's come out and refuted those claims. What have you heard on this one, mate?
Well, I'm told the RFL, the World Cup, which was originally due to be played in 2021, but which was delayed by a year to 2022 because of the Australians pulling out because of the COVID worries about COVID and so on. The RFL created a company specifically to run the World Cup as a subsidiary of the RFL, and that company is the one that took on all the financial liabilities and benefited from the financial income from the World Cup. They anticipated it making a profit, but in fact, they actually managed to make very significant losses for the World Cup in 2022. But the only way in which the RFL would have taken on that indebtedness would be if they gave a guarantee that they would stand as a guarantor for any indebtedness of the Rugby League World Cup company. Now, I am told on quite good authority by people who I think probably know what the true situation is, that they never did that. They didn't they didn't stand as guarantors, and the reason for that was probably because everybody thought that the tournament would make a profit, because after all, it did get supported. I mean, the British government made a £25 million contribution to the World Cup, so there's no way in the world in which it should have lost money, but unfortunately it did, and nobody anticipated that. And the good thing from the RFL's point of view is that, as I say, they didn't stand as guarantors, so they tell me. So if that is true, then there's no way in which they can be liable for that payment, I'm afraid, Jake.
Do you think there'll be more to come out of this? Like, what do you think the next steps moving forward?
Well, you never know, because Troy Grant. What I find a bit surprising is that the World Cup was played in 2022, which is 3 years ago, and obviously that money, the Rugby League World Cup company accepts that it owes around about £450,000 to the International Rugby League body, but it doesn't have those funds because its funds have been drained by its losses. So, but it's still owed. It's owed about £150,000 itself from competing nations who haven't actually paid their participation fees. So, it itself still is still short of that particular income, and that income might never be paid, one imagines. So the thing that does surprise me is that Troy Grant has only made a big issue of this since the changes that were made earlier this year at the Rugby Football League, when Simon Johnson and his fellow directors resigned, and the new people with Nigel Wood and his colleagues came in to the RFL, and Troy's comments have sort of coincided with this idea that the NRL should move in and take over British Rugby League. And they seem to be comments designed to sort of lower the value of rugby league in this country to some degree. And I think they're very political. I mean, Troy is a political guy. He's an ex-member of Parliament in Australia. So I think there's a lot of politicking here, and I'm not sure whether the International Rugby League actually believes it can get that money. I'm not sure that it does, and but who knows? Financial disputes are complex things, Jake, and who knows what evidence might come out of the woodwork. You can never be sure. Um, you can never be sure, but certainly from what I've been told, the RFL looks to be on fairly solid ground.
Okay, great. We'll wait and see what happens.
Keep an eye on it.
What
Yeah.
say
Oh,
you?
yeah.
You
The
can never,
situation
you can never,
changed.
say you can never, fully trust these politicians from time to time.
No,
So hey,
no. Well, Grant is a
uh,
Queensland, isn't he? So you ought to be able to
yeah.
trust the Queensland one. Who
Oh yeah, yeah.
knows? Yeah.
We'll see, mate. We'll see. Time will
Yeah.
tell.
Yeah, I've always
Yeah,
got
the
on well
other.
with Stuart Branch. I think he's a really, nice guy. But I think he might be just barking up the wrong tree here, if I'm really honest
Hmm.
about it. But you never know. Other evidence may come out, and he might be proved right. Who knows? We'll see as time progresses.
Yeah, my question is, why is it taking them so long to raise this or leak this information
Yeah, yeah.
when it could
Well,
have been done years ago?
Troy was very close to Simon Johnson, and was obviously upset when Simon resigned, and is much less close to Nigel Wood, I think. So the personal issues involved there, which is a shame, but who knows? We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Hmm. Now, the other news, mate, Magic Weekend's been announced for Everton next
Yes.
season. What are your thoughts on this move?
First weekend of July, so it'll be at the height of summer. It'll be therefore a lot warmer than it is today around here. And pity you were back in Australia when the second test was played at Everton, because I'm sure you'd have really enjoyed the experience of going there. It's a fantastic venue. It's right on you know, in the docks area, right next to the sea, in effect, in Liverpool. Amazing location. But it also, the trouble with being on the edge of the city in that sort of way, next to the sea, is it makes access to the stadium very difficult. And I've actually had a lot of emails and letters from rugby league fans who were travelling there for that game. There was chaos on the railways that day, and some people are saying, "Oh, what a drag it was getting there and getting back again." So I hope that it's interesting that the fixtures for the Magic Weekend are all derby fixtures. So that you've got the opening fixture will be York versus Huddersfield on the Saturday, and then the fixtures for Lancashire clubs will come right at the very end of the day. So hopefully there's a sort of filter of Yorkshire fans getting there early and then perhaps leaving a bit earlier, and the Lancashire-based clubs they play last, so they will be there at the end, and maybe the transport situation won't be quite as bad as it was for the Test match when everybody was coming and going at the same time. So you never know. We'll see, but it's a fabulous stadium, and I'm sure it'll be a fabulous event. And I think I think it'll draw a very big crowd, because there are still lots of people who are keen to visit Everton, because everybody's heard about the new stadium. Lots of people do enjoy visiting plush new stadiums when they're built, and certainly I do, and it's great to be able to do so. So I think it's going to be a great weekend, and the fact that they're all derby matches, it's going to be York v Huddersfield, Leeds v Bradford, Wakefield v Castleford, Saints v Wigan, Lee v Warrington, and Hull v Hull KR. I mean, it is a mouth-watering series of fixtures, Jake. So if you fancy making the journey, I think you'd enjoy yourself, mate.
Oh, mate, and I'm sure I'd enjoy the hospitality of Liverpool as well. I'm
Oh
sure they'd look
yes,
after
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah,
That was
yeah.
seems like a lot of the Aussies over there enjoyed their time in Liverpool.
Did they?
I think
Have
the
you heard
pubs.
feedback of that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Leeds as well. Seems like a lot of the players and other travelling fans had a blast in those two cities. So I think obviously it provides a different culture to what they would have experienced in London. But
Yeah, yeah.
you can see why they had fun in Liverpool. Aussies, we love a drink just as much as the English. So,
But they always moan about the warm beer in England, though, don't they? But I suppose they, you know,
I mean,
you
it's a
always
bit of
have
a
it so
foreign
cold in it.
concept.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. For us, we're thinking we drink beers to cool down over here. But until you're actually in the freezing cold north of England, then you can truly appreciate a warm ale,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
You've got to like
but
it in
yeah,
the end.
absolutely. But which moves me on to our next point, mate. One fella who looks to be giving up the warm ales for the cold ales will be Harry Newman. He's one of Perth Bears. Oh, I guess he's probably the first signing for the Perth Bears
Yes, yes.
that we know of
I think they've
publicly.
signed another couple of guys actually. Luke Smith, who's coming to London Broncos to spend a year with London Broncos. I think he's signed for them as well. And there's one of the Papua New Guinean players. I can't remember which one it is just offhand, who's also signed for a year with the London Broncos, but will go to Perth in 2027. So yeah, Harry Newman. Um, Played in the third test against Australia. I mean, it was interesting. I was reading an article in one of these Australian newspapers saying that Perth have signed a little-known player, Harry Newman. Well, actually, little known, but actually does play for England. So, I suppose people who play for England are little known to some of the Australian media. But he's a potentially really fine player is Harry Newman, and he's got a lot of attacking capability. And I hope he goes well over in with the Bears. And he's obviously got another year to play with Leeds, but he'll be playing in the year after. The year after this coming season. So, good luck to him. I hope it all goes well. I hope he has an injury-free year in 2026 and goes over there in tip-top condition. I believe he's actually been having a couple of operations on a hernia problem since the third test was completed, but hopefully he'll be in absolutely tip-top shape by the time the season starts this year. But it's interesting. Perth are struggling to sign players, aren't they? In Australia, they've made a bid for some really top stars. I think they were looking at Cameron Munster. They were looking at Jaden Campbell and offering very big deals there, but in both cases, I think they've been turned down. And there's a lot of the problem for a lot of Australian players who live on the East Coast is that they don't want to have to be away from their families quite as much as, I mean, moving to Perth from Sydney would be a bit like moving to England, wouldn't it, in a way? Because, you're thousands of miles away and it's a quite a long plane journey to get back there, and quite an expensive one as well, probably. So the Perth Bears are saying, can you give us some concessions so that we can give free flights for players back to Sydney or Brisbane or wherever without it counting on the salary cap? Now, the obvious response to that would be to say, yes, of course, because we want the Perth Bears to be successful. But I'm afraid there are some of the other 17 clubs who are incredibly short-sighted and don't want to give the Perth Bears any concessions at all, and in fact would be delighted to sort of take, absolutely strangle the club at birth, it seems to me. What I wish they would realise is that if Perth is successful and does well in the competition in 2027, then it means that the NRL is much closer to being a genuinely national rugby league, and the value of its TV contracts and so on and so forth will be significantly enhanced if it can can get a really major foothold in Western Australia. And, the idea that, I noticed some comments from Shane Richardson, the West Tigers chief executive, saying that they shouldn't be given any concessions whatsoever. They should stand on their own feet and all this nonsense. Well, if with that sort of attitude, I'm afraid that the competition in Australia would still be a Sydney suburban New South Wales rugby league competition. They wouldn't have expanded beyond what they had in 1967. So you've got to accept that if a new club is coming in, then you've got to give it some concessions because you want it to be successful. And quite frankly, there's a much more enlightened attitude on the part of somebody like Clint Newton, for example, who's the leader of the Rugby League Players Association, who has made it absolutely clear that the Rugby League Players Association recognise that Perth has to be successful. And to be successful, it has to have a decent squad. It has to be competitive from day one. And it has to be capable of, beating a significant number of its opponents right from the very start. So I think, that's the contrasting attitude of somebody who's, got the good of the whole game at heart compared to a chief executive who's got the good of his own club at heart. And there's nothing wrong with that, that, but you've got to accept that if the competition is going to add value in the future, then it's going to be because of taking in clubs like Perth, rather than, Sydney is already Sydney already has 9 clubs, so you're not going to put any more clubs in Sydney, and it's going to be the expansion clubs that drive the growth in broadcasting income, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I think, our rival code, the AFL, they do a really good job of in the past, when they've introduced teams, they've bent over backwards to make sure they get an advantage when they come into the league. And with the AFL, they've done that through providing new teams additional draft picks and top picks in the draft, so they can get not only the best rookie talent,
and salary cap concessions. They've
right.
played off bigger salary caps. Of course they have, and that's what you've got to do. And it's just pathetic, really, that you wouldn't want to do that. And in rugby league, the only reason why Melbourne Storm was successful early on was because they were owned by News Limited, and they got all sorts of concessions that allowed them to develop and build up a supporter base, and by having a team that was very successful right from the start. So you've got to recognise that template, and particularly when you're trying to develop clubs in cities that are not primarily rugby league cities. It's easy enough. It's okay. Contrasting the Bears with the Dolphins, for example, who were the last new club to come in 2023. But the Dolphins, being based in Redcliffe and Brisbane, that's already got a strong rugby league culture in a way that Perth hasn't. So you've got to develop it in Perth. And it's a similar argument, Jake, to the one that we have with London Broncos, because London Broncos, it's vital that they are a successful club playing out of Wimbledon. Because if London Broncos become a successful Super League club, then the value of British Rugby League, the value of Super League, rises significantly because of that. And so London Broncos need to be supported by the rest of the game. And by the way, they're doing a great job at the moment, because obviously, as you'll know, Darren Lockyer and Grant Weschel, his business partner Grant Weschel, have taken a majority interest in London Broncos from Gary Hetherington, who's working with them. And the London Broncos have just moved into a brand new, a new facility in a place called Sunbury-on-Thames, which is just over the Surrey border from Greater London, very near the River Thames. And they've moved into a facility that had been used by the London Irish Rugby Union Club, which went into liquidation a few years ago and had to relinquish its use of those facilities. And the Broncos have actually now become the primary tenant, and they're going to move their headquarters there. And that facility, it's got 5 rugby pitches, including one all-weather rugby pitch and so on. It's an absolutely terrific facility. And they're, as I say, they're going to be the major tenants. They're now going to have the best training facilities in the whole of British Rugby League, I think, and all the players are going to live around that area, which is a very, very nice part of the southeast of England, and it's half an hour from where they play at Wimbledon. So, Grant Weschel and Darren Lockyer are doing a fantastic job at the moment in regenerating the London Broncos Rugby League Club, and I'd love to have one of those two guys on this podcast at some point to talk about that, because I think there's such a lot to talk about in terms of the development of London Rugby League.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. They've certainly hitting the ground running, and what a facility to secure, in their pursuit of getting back into Super League. But
Absolutely.
Just with the Harry Newman signing, mate, 25 years old, probably the right time for him to have a crack at the NRL.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
but, I
hoping he
mean,
comes over and kills.
I'd love to see him do well in the NRL. He's a very good player. Got great pace, and had one or two injuries earlier in his career, which just sort of slowed his development down a bit, unfortunately. But I think he's a really potentially good player. One little piece of information about him, by the way, he was the first player to be born this century to make his debut in Super League. He was born early in 2000, and as I say, the first player born after the turn of the millennium to make his debut in Super League. So just a minor point, really, but one that I've always remembered about him.
Well, that's a good piece of pub trivia, that.
It is, yes, yeah, yeah.
Uh, well, mate, you touched on the London Broncos there, but it's the Brisbane Broncos over here that have been making waves today. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have probably seen the news now that they've changed their logo, mate. The Brisbane Broncos logo that I grew up with is no more, and it's divided fans. What was your initial thoughts when you saw the logo, mate?
Well, I'm not big on logos, actually. I struggle to remember what the logos of most clubs are. I don't pay that much attention to them. But I also, as a result of that, I don't see the need to change logos. If you've got an established logo, I don't know why you wouldn't want to stick with it. And it might be a good idea on the YouTube version of this podcast, Jake, to put the two logos up side by side together, if you can, to show the viewers the differences, because I think they could then make their own judgment, couldn't they? But I don't see the need. I mean, the new logo would be fine if the club didn't have a logo to start with. If it were a new club with a new logo, that's perfect, of course. But people say the people promoting it say it's a more modern logo. Well, I'm not quite sure precisely how you judge how modern a logo is, really. But there are people with much greater expertise than me who would be able to probably explain that, I suppose.
Yeah. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I like the logo, but I love the logo we have now, and I didn't feel like there was a need to change it, as you said. So, I mean,
well, it's a bit like getting divorced and remarried, isn't it? You liked your first wife, but hopefully you like your second wife even better. But who knows?
Oh, mate. I mean, I'm sure I'll come around to it. And I must admit, once I saw it on their jerseys, because they did unveil their home and away jerseys today for next season, but it did look a lot better. But that logo design was leaked a few months ago, but was sort of swept under the rug a little bit. And I was hoping that they wouldn't go through with it, but they have. And yeah, here we are. So I don't know. I don't know if it's bad luck. I mean, apparently the last time we changed our logo was in 2006, and they won the grand final that year. We've just won the grand final this year, and apparently these plans have been in the works for months now. So maybe the key to winning a premiership is just to change your logo every few years. And
If only it were that easy. Yeah,
I mean, the Bulldogs, they've also changed their logo ahead of next year, and I think that copped a little bit of criticism from fans, but a lot of people are now saying that the Broncos have a worse logo than the Bulldogs. So, but I will put a photo up for the viewers to have their say.
Yeah, I didn't realise the Bulldogs had changed theirs. I always liked the Bulldog logo. So if they've changed it, I'll have a look at it and see what I think about it. But yes, gosh,
Yeah, it's not vastly different. It is modernized, as they keep saying. But yeah, it seems like the Broncos one. A lot of people are saying it looks like they made it using ChatGPT or AI.
Yeah, you never know. Mm, you
Save you
never
some
know.
money.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, mate. And other news, Saints have signed Jackson Hastings. He's going to make his return to Super League. What did you make of this signing?
Well, that's an interesting one. Jackson Hastings is what I would call a personality player, a player who has a lot of personality, is not afraid to speak out about this, that, or the other. And I think it's just what St Helens need, actually, because St Helens have sort of, in the last few years, they've sort of reflected the personality of the coaches. Christian Wolff had terrific success, but was a very sort of contained personality. And Paul Wellens, who came after him, was somewhat similar. Great guys, but not extrovert, if you see what I mean. And and I think Jackson Hastings is got this tendency, if you're not careful, to fall out with people at clubs. But I think he's one of those guys who, when he's on the pitch, you want to watch him. He's got a sort of magnetic aspect to him, and I really liked watching him. He was the Man of Steel, of course, over here. I think it was 2019 that he won that award. So that was when he was with Salford, and that was when he was at his most successful. So I think he's going to be a good signing for St Helens. They've only signed him for a year, which I suppose reflects their concern that it might take him. In 12 months he might have fallen out with them. You never know, but. Who knows? So, but I think he'll be a terrific asset for them, to be honest. And because they've got this young lad George Whitby, who's a potentially really good player, but working with somebody like Jackson Hastings would probably do him an awful lot of good. So, we'll see. But I'd be very happy with that signing if I were a St Helens supporter.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's sort of it's another spine signing for him. Depends on where he plays. He played a little bit of 13 in the NRL this season, but obviously he's been known for his work in the halves. So yeah, who knows? They might decide to play him through the middle. He could be coming off the bench, but yeah, not a bad player to have in your squad. That's for sure.
Oh, he's got he's got a box of tricks up his sleeve as Jackson Hastings, and I really admire him, and I'm amazed that he didn't get in the side as more often at Newcastle Knights. I mean, Newcastle finished at the bottom of the table, the bottom of the ladder, as it's called in the NRL, in 2025, and they didn't play Jackson Hastings very much. Maybe his relationship with Adam O'Brien, the now departed coach at Newcastle, was the reason for that, but. And I mean, interestingly, Adam O'Brien didn't play Wayne Price either. And Wayne Price eventually came back to England and joined Hull. Well, Wayne Price and Jackson Hastings in the same side would have been a terrific terrific to watch, to be honest. Both really smart attacking players. So, if you've got them on your books and you don't play them, then for me, it's not that surprising that you end up finishing at the bottom of the ladder. So that's what happened. And, I think they're probably both better away from the Knights, unfortunately. Of course, they've now signed Dylan Brown, haven't they? So we'll see how he gets on at Newcastle.
Yeah, yeah. No, interesting to see how they go, and if Kalen Ponga can have a injury-free season and get back to some of his best.
Oh gosh, yes.
All right, mate. We've spoken about a lot. Is
Final
there anything
thing,
else? Yeah,
yes. The only thing remaining, we've got the round one fixtures for Super League next year.
yeah.
The competition will begin with York Knights hosting Hull KR on a Thursday night, Thursday, the 12th of February. And that seems slightly surprising to me that they're going to open the season with a game that might well be quite one-sided, to be honest. York, the new club in Super League, Hull KR, the treble winners. But apparently Hull KR requested this game a week before they play Brisbane Broncos in the World Club Challenge. I would have thought they would have benefited from a tougher game against more established Super League opponents, but no, they're going to have this game. So it's a bit of an odd one because last year the opening, or in 2025, the opening game of the year was Wigan versus Lee, which had 20-odd thousand people, and ended up with a 1-0 victory for Lee against their local rivals. But so we do have a danger of the opening game of the year being a bit of a one-sided contest, which I hope it isn't, clearly, because I prefer it not to be. But it's difficult to see any other obvious result from that game.
I just wonder if Willie's, would he be thinking of potentially resting some of his star players for round one, and maybe he's requested an easier matchup, or
Well, he obviously has, but I don't think he'd want to rest anybody, not from that game, because obviously the object of the game would be to help them prepare for the challenge of the Broncos. So I certainly don't think he'll rest anyone. But it's just that it could have been a much sort of more interesting game. I mean, Warrington play St Helens on Friday night, and that if that had been the first game of the season, that would have been a much more a game to sort of anticipate much more really than York v Hull KR. But anyway, that's what the opening fixture will be. The other fixtures, we're going to have a TV double header on Friday night. Catalans versus Huddersfield will kick off at 7 o'clock European time, 6 o'clock our time, and will be on TV, followed by Warrington v St Helens on at 8 o'clock, which will, obviously be a massive game. And then on the Friday night as well, we have Lee versus Leeds. We don't seem to be able to get away from doubling up on games that are played at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Then the two Saturday games, Hull versus Bradford at 5:30 and Wakefield v Toulouse at 8 o'clock. And then on Sunday, Castleford versus Wigan. So that's the opening weekend's fixtures, Jake, for you to watch out for in the middle of February, which is, in my view, far too early to be starting the season, but that's a completely separate debate that we'd better not go into when we've been talking for as long as we have, for about nearly an hour, mate.
yeah, mate, we might save that one for next week, perhaps. But
Yeah.
hey, I won't be arguing if I get to watch a bit of competitive rugby league before
No,
the
no.
NRL season kicks off. Obviously, you guys kick off a little bit earlier.
Mm.
But yeah, mate, I can't wait. I'm excited to see how the expanded competition goes.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Yeah.
mm.
Great stuff,
All right, mate.
mate.
Well, we might wrap it up here, mate. Again, I think we said after recording last week, we didn't even discuss any matches because there are none, but we still seem to be talking for nearly an hour. So
I know.
the news
Yeah,
cycle never stops, mate.
yeah. Absolutely. No, there's always lots to talk about, but we'll have one or two guests coming up for future issues. By the way, can I just show you our Rugby League yearbook is now out. It's £25.99. You can get it from our website, or you can hopefully get it in one of the bookshops that for Christmas. It's out in plenty of time for Christmas this year. The latest edition of the Rugby League World looks back on the Ashes series. Unfortunately, it's got those Aussies on the front cover, mate, as the winners. And the latest edition of League Express has we've got the annual readers poll where we're picking out the the best player of the year. So, and various other things. In fact, that was last week's, but we've got the entry form again in this week's paper as well. And so we're still as busy as we can be over here, mate, despite the fact that we're in the postseason.
Absolutely. And, what a perfect gift to have under the Christmas tree come December.
Yes.
Rugby League yearbook, an accurate, an accurate record of everything that's happened this season, and
anything
quite a handy tool to have in the office.
League. Yeah, anything you want to know, it's in there. So, terrific book, and congratulations to Tim Butcher and Danny Spencer, who are the people who have put it together. And as always, they've done a fantastic job, I'll tell you. Great stuff.
Yeah. No, awesome, mate. All right, Martyn, I better let you go, mate. We'll catch up again next week, hey?
Great stuff. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, mate.